The very first thing Sang Ahli Pengawal does is dangle this ridiculous, delicious question in front of you. What happens when a man who has spent 10 years training his body, his reflexes, his discipline, basically sculpting himself into a human shield, comes down from the mountain and realizes the thing he's least prepared for is wanting to be loved? Not wanting to win. Not wanting to prove himself. Wanting to be chosen. Wanting to matter to someone in a way that can't be measured with a sparring score or a survival instinct. And I'm not gonna lie, that setup grabbed me by the collar, because the show understands something a lot of action romance dramas forget: the hardest fight is the one where you don't get to throw a punch. And since you're here on Bongo Gaming with me, let me just say it plainly: if you like your romance with teeth, your tension with heart, and your bodyguard premise actually treated like a pressure cooker instead of a cute aesthetic, this one has a lot to chew on. Also, if you end up liking the vibe of this review, consider subscribing, just one click, no guilt, you know the deal. And for spoilers, I'm going moderate. I'm going to talk about key turning points and what the story is doing, but I'm not going to blow the biggest endgame payoffs or flatten the final stretch into a checklist. So here's the spine of it. Zhong Xiaohu. 10 years of training. He comes down the mountain chasing love. Already, I love how heroic that sounds on paper, in the best way. It's not "I must avenge my clan" or "I must reclaim my throne." It's "I want something soft." And the show never fully mocks him for it. It lets that desire be sincere, which is rare. Then fate, or plot gravity, yanks him straight into the adult world when he saves director Lan Xin. Director is doing a lot of work there. The word carries power, social position, money, enemies, expectations. She is not just a love interest, she's a moving target with a job title. And he becomes her bodyguard. Not her pet. Not her accessory. Her shield. That's where the drama starts playing with contrast in a way I genuinely adored. The man trained in isolation, in ritual, in physical clarity, hit, block, breathe, gets dropped into a messy human battlefield where the danger doesn't always announce itself with a blade. Sometimes it's a smile that lasts half a second too long. Sometimes it's a meeting room that goes quiet at the wrong time. Sometimes it's family. Sometimes it's reputation. Sometimes it's the kind of threat you can't punch. What really sold me early was how quickly the show establishes that protecting someone isn't just about standing in front of them. It's about reading them. Learning their rhythms. Knowing what they do when they are stressed, what they do when they are lying, what they do when they are trying not to cry in public because crying would be unprofessional. And Lan Xin, this is important, doesn't get written as helpless just to make Xiaohu look cool. She's a director for a reason. She's competent. She's sharp. She's used to being obeyed. So when Xiaohu arrives with his mountain-born sincerity and his almost old-fashioned sense of duty, there's friction right away, because she's not asking for a savior. She's asking for control. And he's not offering control. He's offering presence. Let me rewind to the moment that, for me, flipped the switch from "okay, I'll keep watching" to "oh no, I'm emotionally seated." It's not even some massive reveal. It's one of those mid-tension sequences where the threat of an assassin is in the air. Again, I'm staying impressionistic here, because the show plays a lot of these beats with shadow and implication, and you get this visual language that's so clean you can feel the director's intent. Lan Xin is framed with glass and hard lines around her. Office lights. Polished surfaces. Everything reflective. Everything capable of showing you a version of yourself you didn't ask to see. Xiaohu, by contrast, is shot with warmer tones whenever the camera lets him breathe. Even when he's in the same space, he brings this sense of groundedness, like the room gets heavier in a comforting way. And there's this bit where Lan Xin realizes, without saying it, that the danger is not theoretical. It's not business rivalry. It's actual violence. You see it in her posture before you see it in her face. That microshift. Xiaohu steps in, not dramatically, not with some superhero pose. Just steps in. He puts himself between her and the unknown. And the show doesn't rush the moment. It sits there long enough for you to understand what it costs him. Not physically. Emotionally. because choosing to protect someone is choosing to be responsible for their continued existence. That's a terrifying kind of intimacy. And right there is where Sang Ahli Pengawal starts doing its quiet theme work. Love, in this show, isn't a fireworks montage. It's responsibility. It's patience. It's showing up even when you're not thanked. It's being misunderstood and still staying. That may sound like I'm romanticizing suffering, and I'll get to the parts where the drama maybe leans a bit too hard on noble endurance, but the intention is clear. It wants to ask, if you say you love someone, what are you actually promising? Now, the obvious genre pleasure here is the constant external pressure. Assassins. Rival families. Conspiracies. The sense that there are forces moving around Lanshin that are bigger than one person's willpower. And that's where the show's pacing becomes really crucial, because with premises like this, you can either spiral into repetitive, another attacker shows up, loops, or you can make each threat feel like it reveals something new about the characters and their world. Sang Ahli Pengawal mostly chooses the second option, which is why I ended up loving it rather than just binging it like junk food. The first several arcs, again, not getting episode specific, are basically the show building a pattern and then breaking it. We see Xiaohu learning the language of the city. We see Lanshin testing him, sometimes intentionally, sometimes just because she's not used to someone who doesn't flatter her. We see the workplace environment and the social hierarchy that comes with her position. And underneath that, the drama plants this ongoing question: is Xiaohu protecting Lanshin because it's his duty, because he wants her approval? Or because he actually sees her as a person and not a mission? Because here's the thing. A bodyguard romance can get creepy fast if it isn't careful. I'll watch you all the time, I'll control your movement, I'll decide who gets access to you, that can slide into possessiveness in 2 seconds if the writing is lazy. What I appreciated is that Sang Ahli Pengawal repeatedly tries to frame Xiaohu's protection as consent-based, as much as the premise allows. Lanshin has agency. She pushes back. She sets boundaries. And when she doesn't, the show often treats that as a tension point, not as a fantasy to be celebrated. Let me give you a very specific feeling but not overly specific mini-scene, because this is the kind of moment the drama lives and dies on. Picture a corridor at night. Not a horror corridor, not a neon action corridor, just a real, quiet building corridor where everything sounds louder because everyone's gone home. The camera stays a little too far away on purpose, like you're watching through a security feed. Lanshin is walking, heels sharp against the floor, the kind of sound that screams "I'm alone," without meaning to. Xiaohu is half a step behind, not looming, not distant, just exactly there. And then a tiny sound changes. A door that shouldn't be open. A soft shift of air. The music doesn't jump scare you, it tightens. Xiaohu's whole body changes in a fraction of a second. It's in the shoulders. The breath. The way his attention becomes a weapon. And Lanshin doesn't even know what she didn't notice until she sees him move. That's the point. He's living in a layer of reality she can't access. And for a moment, she looks at him like, "Who are you?" Not in a romantic way. In a genuinely unsettled way. Because imagine realizing the person next to you has been hearing threats you can't hear. That they've been carrying fear you didn't even know was present. That's when their chemistry starts to matter, not in the "they look pretty together" way, but in the "their relationship is built on unequal information" way. And the show plays with that imbalance constantly. Lanshin has social power. Xiaohu has physical power. Lanshin has money, networks, reputation. Xiaohu has instincts, training, and a kind of moral clarity that sometimes makes him naive. Both of them can hurt the other without trying. Both of them can save the other without realizing it. I'm going to say something that might be a mildly contrarian take, because I've already seen people reduce this drama to hot bodyguard, cold CEO, blah blah. If you watch it that way, sure, you'll get your dopamine. But I actually think the more interesting dynamic is that Lanshin isn't just cold. She's conditioned. She's been trained by her environment to treat vulnerability like bad PR. The drama doesn't excuse every choice she makes, but it does contextualize her. And Xiaohu isn't just pure cinnamon roll warrior. He has his own kind of stubbornness that can be suffocating. He can turn his protectiveness into a wall that blocks her growth. Sometimes he's so focused on keeping her safe that he forgets she wants to live, not just survive. And that's where the rival family and conspiracy stuff becomes more than just external noise. Because those elements are basically the world insisting, over and over, that love is inconvenient. Love is a liability. Love makes you predictable. Love gives your enemies leverage. The show keeps putting that pressure on them, and what I liked is that it doesn't always let them pass the test with a perfect score. There are moments where you can feel the relationship bend. Not break, but bend. Now let's talk about performances, because a story like this can be written well and still fall flat if the actors don't sell the emotional math. Xiaohu's actor, again, I'm not going to pretend I'm reading credits off a teleprompter, brings a physical honesty to the role that really helps. There's a difference between, I can do action choreography, and, I inhabit a body that is always calculating risk. Xiaohu often looks like he's listening to the room rather than the person speaking. His eyes track exits. His posture is disciplined, but not stiff. And crucially, when he's in softer moments, the show allows him to look a little lost. That's the vulnerability that keeps him from becoming a walking trope. Lan Xin's performance is trickier, and I mean that as a compliment. Playing a powerful woman without turning her into a caricature is hard. If you play her too icy, the audience hates her. If you soften her too quickly, she stops feeling like someone who has survived to the top. Lan Xin's actor finds this middle zone where you can see the exhaustion under the composure. The best moments are when she's speaking like a director, polished, decisive, but her hands betray her. A slight tremor. A grip on a pen. A pause that lasts a beat too long. Those choices make her feel like a person managing a brand called Lan Xin in real time. And because I'm a sucker for this kind of detail, I need to shout out the way the drama uses costuming to underline character without screaming about it. Lan Xin's wardrobe tends to be structured, clean, intentional, like armor made of fabric. Even when she's not in danger, she looks like she's ready to be judged. Xiaohu, meanwhile, carries traces of his training background in how simply he's styled, especially early on. The contrast isn't just aesthetic. It tells you how they move through the world. She prepares to be seen. He prepares to act. Here's a rehook question that kept circling in my head while watching. What happens when the person protecting you is also the person who makes you feel the most exposed? Because that's the core tension. Xiaohu sees too much. Not in a creepy surveillance way, but in the way someone sees you when they are not impressed by your title. And Lan Xin is used to being valued for what she can do, not for who she is when the meeting ends. The show plays with that in the dialogue, too. There's a particular flavor to their conversations where Lan Xin will say something like a command, and Xiaohu responds like it's a principle. She's speaking management. He's speaking ethics. And the friction is delicious, because neither is wrong. They are just operating on different systems. Now, pacing. This is where my loved stance comes with a tiny asterisk. The middle of the drama, without specifying exact plot beats, does flirt with repetition. There are stretches where the threat of the weak energy starts to feel like it's circling the same emotional point. Lan Xin is in danger, Xiaohu steps in, they survive, feelings intensify, outside forces escalate. And if you're someone who needs constant plot innovation, you might start itching. But, and this is why I'm not dragging it, I think the repetition is partly the point. The show wants you to feel the grind of being targeted. It's not one big dramatic event, it's a constant pressure that changes how you sleep, how you trust, how you plan your day. That kind of sustained tension can look samey, structurally, but emotionally it's cumulative. You start to understand why Lan Xin's patience frays. You start to see why Xiaohu becomes more intense. Their relationship doesn't deepen because of one grand confession. It deepens because of accumulated survival. And the editing supports that more than I expected. The drama often cuts in ways that emphasize interruption. Conversations get cut off. Moments of calm don't get full closure. Just when you settle into a soft scene, the show will slice it with a sharp transition, sometimes sound first, like you hear the next environment before you see it, so your body learns not to relax. It's manipulative, yes. But it's smart manipulation. It places you in their nervous systems. Music-wise, it's mostly restrained, which I appreciated. A lesser drama would slap inspirational strings under every glance and call it romance. Here, the score tends to pulse underneath suspense and then pull back during intimacy, letting silence do some of the work. And silence, in a bodyguard story, is never neutral. Silence is when you listen for danger. Silence is when you finally hear your own fear. Silence is when you accidentally hear your own heart doing something stupid. There's also this subtle motif the drama keeps returning to, and it's not a melody as much as a sensation, the idea of distance. Physical distance. Emotional distance. Social distance. So many shots are framed with space between them, even when they are in the same room. A table. A doorway. A car seat gap. Glass. Always glass. And then, when the drama wants you to feel closeness, it doesn't always push them into a kiss. Sometimes it's as simple as the camera letting them share the same focal plane. They are both sharp, both present, both equally real. That's cinematic language saying, they are meeting as humans. Now let's touch the conspiracy angle, because it's easy to hand-wave it as generic corporate enemies, and I don't think that's fair to what the show is trying to do. The conspiracy and the rival family pressure function like a mirror for Lanshin's world. Power is inherited, power is hoarded, and power is defended with violence when necessary. That's the implication. When you see a rival family in a drama like this, it's not just bad guys. It's the system saying, we decide who gets to be safe. And Lanshin, as a successful director, has stepped into a space where her existence threatens someone else's control. Which makes Xiaohu's presence fascinating, because he's not from that system. He's from the mountain. He's from training. He's from merit, at least in the fantasy sense. He's an outsider who cannot be bought in the same way. And of course the system hates that. Of course it tries to crush him or absorb him. And the drama keeps teasing you with that question, will Xiaohu stay himself in this world, or will he become another tool? And I need to confess something personal here, because it affected how I watched the romance. I'm someone who, in real life, tends to distrust ground protector energy. I've seen too many stories, fictional and not, where I'm doing this for your safety becomes a cover for control. So I went into Ahli Pengawal with my guard up, fully prepared to side-eye the bodyguard fantasy. And what surprised me is that the drama frequently made me soften. Not because it excused possessiveness, but because it framed protection as devotion without entitlement. Xiaohu doesn't protect Lanshin so she'll owe him love like a payment. He protects her because, in his worldview, that's what love looks like at first, a vow you keep even when you're not rewarded. That doesn't mean the show is perfect about it. There are moments where I wanted Lanshin to snap harder, to demand more space, to remind him that she is not a fragile artifact. But even that frustration kept me engaged, because it meant the show had created a relationship dynamic I could argue with like it was real. And speaking of real, there's a tonal choice Ahli Pengawal makes that I think is quietly bold for a 2026 release. It allows sincerity to be sincere. It's not afraid of earnestness. Xiaohu is earnest. Lanshin, under layers, is earnest. The show isn't constantly winking at you like, haha, aren't romance tropes silly? It commits. And that commitment is what makes the emotional hits land. Okay, quick aside because I laughed at myself. There's a stretch early on where Xiaohu's down the mountain searching for love energy is so pure it almost feels like watching a very dangerous golden retriever walk into a corporate boardroom. And I mean that lovingly. He's got this vibe of, hello, I am here to do my duty and also perhaps experience affection, while everyone else is playing chess with poison pieces. It's absurd in the best way, and it's also the point. He's a contrast agent. He reveals how rotten the environment can be because he doesn't automatically accept it as normal. Now, about momentum. The drama does a good job escalating stakes without immediately jumping to maximum chaos. We start with the inciting rescue, Xiaohu saving Lanshin, And then the story stacks complications. The assassins and rival family pressure force Lanshin to accept protection. Accepting protection forces her to yield some control. Yielding control forces her to confront her trust issues. Trust issues force conflict. Conflict forces intimacy. Intimacy creates vulnerability. Vulnerability creates new threats. The chain is clean. Even when the pacing slows, you can still feel the logic. And it's not just plot logic, it's emotional logic. When Xiaohu thwarts danger, he feels more necessary. When he feels more necessary, he risks defining his worth by her dependence. That's a dangerous psychological trap, and the show flirts with it. Lanshin, meanwhile, risks confusing relief with love. When someone makes your life less terrifying, your heart can sprint ahead of your brain. The drama understands that, and it's why their connection feels charged rather than convenient. Another thing I appreciated is how the show uses the awakening his mother thread, yes, that is part of the storyline, as something more than a random side quest. Without getting too specific about how it happens or when, the fact that Xiaohu is trying to wake his mother functions like emotional symbolism baked into plot. He's a man who's trained for 10 years, which already suggests sacrifice. What did he give up? What did he leave behind? A mother in a new and awake state, whether literal, metaphorical, or both, hangs over him like unfinished childhood. Like a part of his life that never got closure. And when a character carries that kind of unresolved ache, it changes how they love. It can make them cling. It can make them overprotect. It can make them desperate to save, because saving is the closest thing to being saved. Lanshin, on the other hand, is surrounded by a different kind of family pressure. Rival families aren't just enemies, they are reminders that bloodlines still matter in a world pretending to be modern. So you have these two people, one coming from a past that's personal and emotional, one trapped in a present that's political and social. And the romance becomes this bridge that might actually hold them, or might snap under weight. Here's where the cinematography really starts flexing. The action, when it happens, is often shot to emphasize proximity rather than spectacle. You feel bodies close. You feel the risk of a single misstep. Even when the choreography is slick, the camera doesn't always do the "look how cool this is" thing. It often does the "look how fast this could go wrong" thing. That makes the protection premise more visceral. You're not watching an invincible hero. You're watching someone who can be overwhelmed. Which makes every quiet moment after a confrontation feel earned. And then there's Lanshin's world, clean, bright, corporate, but filmed with a slight chill. The color palette leans into cool tones when she's in role. The warmth creeps in when she's alone with Xiaohu or when she's forced into honesty. That's not accidental. That's the show literally painting emotional safety into the frame. If you're a newcomer who doesn't usually pay attention to visual language, you'll still feel it. You'll just find yourself thinking, why do I feel calmer in this scene? That's craft. Now, because I'm being fair, I do want to point out the one place where I think Ahli Pengawal occasionally trips over its own ambition, the way it balances empowerment with rescue fantasy. Even though Lanshin is competent, the premise still requires her to be in danger often enough to justify Xiaohu's constant presence. That's the genre contract. But sometimes, the frequency of threats risks making her world feel like it exists primarily to endanger her. And I can already hear someone saying, well, yeah, it's a bodyguard drama. Sure. But there's a difference between danger reveals character and danger is just a delivery system for male heroism. The show mostly stays on the right side of that line by giving Lanshin meaningful choices. She doesn't just wait to be saved. She responds. She strategizes. She negotiates. She pushes back against the idea that safety means passivity. But I still had moments where I wanted one more scene of her competence that wasn't immediately interrupted by external threat. Just to remind us that she is not defined by being targeted. The drama gives you enough, but I'm greedy. And yet, here's the twist, I think the show's willingness to make Lanshin's life feel constantly threatened also underlines a social point it's making, whether intentionally or not. Women in power don't get to relax. They don't get to exist without being challenged, punished, tested, or attacked. Sometimes that attack is literal, like assassins. Sometimes it's social assassination. Either way, her body becomes the battleground for other people's agendas. That's dark, and the show doesn't always stop to lecture you about it, but it's there if you're watching with your brain turned on. Every few episodes, there's also this sense that the drama wants to ask what success costs. The storyline says Xiaohu ends up with love and success, and Lanxin's already successful on paper. But the show makes you feel that success is not the same as fulfillment. Lanxin's position brings admiration, sure, but it also brings isolation. And Xiaohu's training brings capability, but it also brings a kind of emotional stunting. 10 years focused on discipline can leave you with a heart that doesn't know how to speak. Which brings me to dialogue again, because Sang Ahli Pengawal uses a lot of subtext. People say one thing and mean another. Xiaohu, ironically, is the most direct person in the room, and that directness becomes its own kind of weapon. There are scenes where Lanxin is playing corporate politeness, and Xiaohu answers too honestly, and you can feel everyone else short-circuiting like, wait, are we allowed to say what we mean? And it's funny sometimes, but it's also liberating. That honesty is part of why Lanxin is drawn to him. He's not impressed by the performance. He sees her exhaustion and treats it like it matters. Let me toss in another rehook, because this is where the drama starts getting sneakily addictive. At what point does protection become partnership? Because that transition is the heart of the romance. Anyone can stand in front of a bullet in a fantasy story. Not everyone can stand next to someone in a room full of enemies and treat them like an equal. And the show slowly nudges Xiaohu toward that. You can feel him learning that Lanxin doesn't need someone to decide for her, she needs someone who respects her decisions even when they are risky. That's hard for him. He's trained to reduce risk, to control variables. Love doesn't let you do that. Love is letting someone you care about choose a path that might hurt them. Love is trusting their autonomy. Lanxin's arc is the mirror. She's trained to command, to manage, to keep her emotions from affecting her performance. But the more she's forced into real danger, the more she can't hide behind professionalism. Fear will strip you down. And when Xiaohu is there, seeing her stripped down, she has to decide, do I treat this man like staff, or do I let him become someone I can lean on without feeling ashamed? This is where the chemistry becomes less about flirting and more about trust building. And if you're a newcomer who's worried that this will be all slow burn staring, don't worry. The tension is active. It's made of choices. It's made of boundaries tested and renegotiated. And when the drama does give you moments of closeness, again, staying moderate on spoilers, it often earns them through emotional labor first, not just proximity. A word on sound design, because it's one of those invisible things that can make or break suspense. Sang Ahli Pengawal uses silence and ambient noise effectively. You hear footsteps. You hear fabric movement. You hear the click of a door that shouldn't click. Those details make the danger feel grounded. And in more intimate scenes, the soundscape softens. You'll hear breathing, quieter room tone, less musical guidance. It lets you sit in the discomfort of two people who want to say something and don't know how. Now, I've been talking a lot about how the show handles threat and romance, but I don't want to skip over the down the mountain searching for love premise, because it's actually the emotional engine. Xiaohu begins as someone who thinks love is a destination. Like, I will find it. As if love is a person you meet and then you're done. The drama slowly teaches him that love is a practice. It's daily. It's messy. It doesn't care how well trained you are. And that's why watching him navigate Lanxin's world is so satisfying. Every time he succeeds physically, the drama presents a new emotional challenge that he can't punch. And honestly, that's where I found myself unexpectedly moved. Because I know that feeling. Not the assassin part, obviously, my life is way less cinematic, thank God, but the feeling of being good at the things that earn you praise, and still feeling lost when it comes to the thing you want most. Being capable doesn't automatically make you fulfilled. Being disciplined doesn't automatically make you emotionally fluent. Xiaohu's longing is simple, but it's not shallow. and the show treats it with respect. There's also an interesting moral texture in the way the drama frames rival families and conspiracies. It would be easy to paint everything as good versus evil. But the show, at least from how it frames motivations and reactions, seems more interested in showing how systems create villains. When you have power, you protect it. When you inherit legacy, you defend it. When your family's status is threatened, you rationalize ugly choices. That doesn't excuse assassination attempts, no, absolutely not, but it does add a layer of realism to why these conflicts don't just go away with one heroic act. And Xiaohu's role in that is almost disruptive. He doesn't have generational baggage in the same way. He's not impressed by family name wars. He's impressed by integrity. Which is why he becomes such a problem for people who rely on intimidation and hierarchy. It's satisfying watching a character like that walk into a world that assumes everyone can be bought, because he's like, no, just, no. That simplicity is refreshing. If I sound like I'm gushing, I am, but I'm also paying attention to where the drama earns it. A lot of the emotional punch comes from restraint. The show doesn't always give you the catharsis immediately. It withholds. It delays. It makes you sit with discomfort. And then when it finally lets a character crack, maybe Lanxin dropping the director mask for half a minute, maybe Xiaohu admitting something he's been swallowing, you feel it. There's a particular kind of scene the drama likes, where something terrifying happens, and afterward, instead of a big hug or a dramatic speech, you get this quiet aftermath. Two people in the same space, the adrenaline fading, both trying to act normal because acknowledging fear would make it real. And those scenes are my weakness. Because that's where you see acting, not just plot. You see who can hold emotion in their jaw, in their eyes, in the way they avoid looking directly at the other person because looking would be admitting need. And before you think, okay, so it's all moody and tense, let me reassure you, the drama does let itself breathe. There are lighter beats, often coming from Xiaohu's fish-out-of-water sincerity. Not slapstick. More like gentle humor. The kind where you smile because someone is being unexpectedly earnest in a cynical space. Those moments matter because they keep the show from becoming a non-stop anxiety spiral. They also make the darker turns hit harder, because you've tasted what peace could feel like. Here's another question that the drama quietly asks, and it's why the awakening his mother thread matters so much. Can you build a future if your past is still asleep? Because Xiaohu's life before Lanxin isn't just background, it's an unresolved wound. And Lanxin, for all her power, also carries her own kind of emotional sleepwalking, moving through days, winning battles, but not truly living. The romance isn't just, they fall in love. It's, they wake up. Now, I want to talk about the way the show frames success, because the storyline promises that Xiaohu gets love and success. And that could have been corny. It could have been shallow wish fulfillment. But what I liked is that Ahli Pengawal tends to treat success as consequence, not prize. The more Xiaohu proves himself as a protector, the more he becomes visible. Visibility brings opportunity, sure, but it also brings danger. And Lanxin's success is what made her a target in the first place. So when the drama talks about succeeding, it's never pure celebration. It's always complicated. And that's where the editing again is doing quiet work. You'll get sequences where things seem to be stabilizing, like maybe Lanxin is regaining control of her life, maybe Xiaohu is finding his place, then the cut will remind you, no, the world is still moving. The threat isn't gone. The rivals haven't stopped. The conspiracy is still breathing. That constant motion creates this feeling of living on the edge of a knife, which is exactly what the characters are doing. If you're a newcomer and you're wondering whether you need to be a martial arts drama person to enjoy this, I genuinely don't think so. The martial element, the 10 years training, the mountain discipline, functions more like character backstory and movement style than like lore you have to memorize. It's not asking you to keep track of sect names and ancient rules. It's using the trained warrior archetype to contrast with a modern power struggle. And that's accessible. What might divide viewers more is the romance pacing. Because it's not instant. The show doesn't give you a fast, easy, they're together comfort. It gives you longing. It gives you hesitation. It gives you two people trying to do the right thing in a situation where the right thing keeps changing. If you need immediate gratification, you might get impatient. If you like tension that builds like a storm cloud, you're going to be fed. And the storm cloud is important, because the show's middle stretch is where it starts tightening the screws on trust. It's one thing to trust your bodyguard to catch a threat. It's another to trust them with your life decisions. And as the conspiracy deepens and the rival family pressure escalates, Lan Xin is forced into choices that test whether Xiaohu is truly on her side, or whether his idea of her best interest will override her will. That's when the romance becomes a moral debate, not just a vibe. I also want to highlight something about Lan Xin's characterization that I think the drama does better than expected. It allows her to be wrong without punishing her into humiliation. She makes choices that have consequences. She misreads people. She sometimes leans too hard on control. But the show doesn't treat her mistakes as proof she shouldn't have power. It treats them as proof she's human under pressure. That's a big difference, and it made me respect the writing a lot more. Xiaohu, similarly, isn't framed as perfect. His training gives him confidence, but it also gives him blind spots. He can underestimate political games. He can assume honesty will solve what's actually a structural problem. He can believe that if he's strong enough, he can keep the world from touching her. And the drama keeps reminding him, gently but firmly, that strength doesn't stop betrayal. Strength doesn't stop someone you love from making a decision you don't like. Strength doesn't fix everything. There's a moment, more of an emotional beat than a plot beat, where you can feel Xiaohu realize that protecting Lan Xin might cost him the very thing he came down the mountain to find. Because love isn't guaranteed. Being useful isn't the same as being wanted. That realization sits in his eyes in a way that made my chest tighten, and I don't say that lightly. That's the kind of internal shift that hooks me harder than any knife fight. And if you think I'm only here for the romance, no. The thriller side is genuinely gripping when it wants to be. The show understands how to create paranoia. It understands that the scariest threats are often the ones that can smile in public. The rival family element adds this generational weight, this sense of old grudges wearing modern suits. And the conspiracy thread gives the story a forward pull, because you're not just watching random danger, you're watching a pattern form. Which brings me to a craft point I don't hear enough people talk about: momentum isn't just speed. Momentum is direction. Ahli Pengawal always feels like it's heading somewhere, even when it slows down to breathe. The emotional direction is clear. The thematic direction is clear. The question of what love costs in a dangerous world is always present, even when the scene is just two people sharing a quiet moment. And those quiet moments, this is where I started really trusting the drama, are not written like filler. They are written like pressure release valves. They matter. They change the relationship. They reveal something. They plant something. You can feel the writers using calm not as downtime, but as setup. So when the story leans into the bigger beats later, Xiaohu thwarting a conspiracy, the situation with his mother awakening, the sense of him not just protecting but actively dismantling threats, it doesn't feel like a random genre shift. It feels like a man who started as a shield becoming someone who can actually reshape the battlefield. And Lan Xin's part in that shift is what makes or breaks it emotionally, because if she becomes just the person being protected, the whole thing collapses into cliché. But if she becomes a partner in the fight against the forces targeting her, then the romance evolves into something sturdier. And the show keeps nudging toward that sturdiness. It keeps presenting Lan Xin with moments where she could retreat into fear or pride, and instead she has to decide whether to trust. Not trust that Xiaohu is strong. Trust that she can be seen. That's where Ahli Pengawal starts to feel less like a trope sandwich and more like a story about intimacy under surveillance, love under threat, identity under pressure, and two people trying to build something real while the world tries to turn them into pieces on a board. And the deeper it goes, the more it becomes clear that the biggest danger isn't always the assassin in the shadows, it's the slow erosion of the self when you're forced to live defensively all the time, when you start making choices based on fear instead of desire, when you start confusing survival with living. Because once you start noticing that, you start watching the bodyguard scenes differently. You start paying attention not just to how Xiaohu moves, but to what it does to Lanxin to be constantly watched, constantly escorted, constantly reminded that her life is at risk. You start asking whether safety is worth the loss of privacy, whether protection is worth the loss of spontaneity, whether love can grow in a space where danger keeps interrupting every tender moment, and the drama is smart enough to not answer that immediately. It lets it simmer, it lets it create tension between them in ways that aren't just jealousy or misunderstandings, but philosophical disagreement about what a life should look like when you have the means to control it but not the power to guarantee it. And that's where I found myself leaning in harder, waiting to see how the show would handle the next escalation, especially when Lanxin starts to realize that trusting Xiaohu doesn't just mean letting him stand in front of her, it means letting him stand beside her while she makes a decision that could change the balance between them. And you can see the hesitation hit her like a physical weight as she looks at him and tries to figure out whether he'll respect her choice or try to override it because he's afraid, because he's protective, because he's in love, because he's still learning the difference between guarding someone's body and guarding their freedom. And right as that realization starts to land, the drama pivots into one of its tensest stretches where the rival family pressure stops feeling like an abstract threat and starts feeling like a net tightening around every part of Lanxin's life, including the parts she thought were untouchable. And Xiaohu, who's been reacting to danger, has to decide whether he's going to keep playing defense or finally take a step that means crossing a line he's been avoiding, a step that risks turning him from protector into player, from shield into player, from shield into a sword with consequences. And the show doesn't treat that shift like a cool upgrade, it treats it like a moral problem. Because the minute Xiaohu starts acting instead of reacting, he's no longer just preventing harm, he's shaping outcomes. He's making enemies on purpose. He's stepping into Lanxin's arena, where every move has ripple effects, where winning today might mean creating a vendetta tomorrow. And I love that the drama doesn't pretend that's easy for him. It would have been so tempting to do the power fantasy thing, where the mountain-trained guy shows up and effortlessly outplays rich rivals and shadowy conspirators because he's the main character. But Ahli Pengawal keeps reminding you that skills don't translate cleanly across worlds. Physical training helps, sure. Instinct helps. But boredom, danger and family politics are slippery. Xiaohu can't block a rumor with his forearm. He can't dodge a social trap the way he dodges a blade. So when he begins to play, you feel the risk. You feel him learning a new kind of combat in real time, and sometimes you can sense that he hates it. Lanxin, meanwhile, is watching him change, and that's where the romance gets complicated in a way that made me genuinely sit up. Because if you're Lanxin, you hired a bodyguard. You wanted safety. You did not necessarily want to be someone's catalyst for transformation into a man who could burn down a room for you. That's romantic on paper, sure. But it's also terrifying. It's also responsibility. If someone is willing to become something harsher because of you, what do you owe them? Do you owe them your heart? Do you owe them your approval? Do you owe them a future? The drama keeps circling that question without making it melodramatic. It's in the glances. It's in the pauses after he speaks. It's in the way Lanxin's control instinct flares when she realizes she can't fully manage what Xiaohu is becoming. She can manage staff. She can manage projects. She can manage perception. She cannot manage devotion. Devotion is its own weather system. And right around here, the show gets really good at staging intimacy as tension instead of comfort. There's this particular kind of scene it does where the two of them are physically close because of necessity, tight spaces, rushed movement, quick exits, but emotionally they are worlds apart because neither knows what the other needs. Lanxin needs autonomy. Xiaohu needs reassurance. Lanxin is terrified of needing anyone. Xiaohu is terrified of being unnecessary. Those fears collide like two cars in slow motion, and you're just watching the wreck happen before it fully happens. If you're the kind of viewer who likes to watch romance like it's a puzzle, like, okay, what is this character actually asking for beneath their words? This drama feeds you. It gives you enough to read. It gives you silence you can interpret. It gives you contradictions that make psychological sense. Xiaohu will be calm in a life-threatening situation and then emotionally clumsy in a private conversation. Lanxin will be brilliant in a negotiation and then completely unable to say, "I'm scared." Those are real feeling imbalances. Here's the thing that surprised me most, though: Sang Ahli Pengawal is not shy about how lonely it is to be protected. That sounds counterintuitive, but think about it. When you have a bodyguard, you're constantly reminded that you're a target. Your normal life becomes a security plan. Your spontaneity becomes a risk assessment. Even your friendships get filtered through suspicion. And the show lets that psychological cost sit on Lanshin's shoulders. She doesn't just become the woman who is safe now. She becomes someone whose entire relationship with the world is altered. There's a sequence, again, impressionistic, because I'm not going to fabricate a specific event, that captures this so well. Lanshin is in a public-facing environment, the kind where she has to be on. She has to smile, shake hands, speak confidently. The lighting is bright and flattering, the sound is full of chatter, and the camera is moving with her like she's being admired. But Xiaohu is there in the edge of the frame, scanning, tracking, calculating. And the way it's edited, you keep cutting between her performance and his vigilance. You start to feel like the audience is split into two experiences, her world of appearances and his world of threats. And then there's a moment where the ambient sound dips, just slightly, like someone turned down reality. Lanshin's smile falters for half a heartbeat. She's still in front of people, still fine, but you can feel her dissociating. You can feel the thought: am I living, or am I being escorted through life? That's not an action beat. That's a psychological beat. And it made me respect the show, because it could have kept everything glossy and romantic, and instead it chose to show the weird claustrophobia of safety. Now let's talk about the villains and antagonistic forces in a way that stays fact-safe. We know there are assassins. We know there's a rival family. We know there's a conspiracy. The drama doesn't rely solely on one mastermind vibe, at least in how it presents the pressure. It's more like a web. And that web is what makes it scary, because you can't just punch a web. You can't arrest a web. You can't expose a web with one dramatic press conference and call it done. A web adapts. And I appreciated that the show seems to understand moral ambiguity, not in the sense of assassins are misunderstood sweethearts, but in the sense that power structures create incentives for cruelty. Rival families don't wake up and think, let's be evil today. They wake up and think, we can't lose. They wake up and think, if we don't crush her, she'll crush us. And that's how human beings justify monstrosity. The drama plays that as a system problem, which gives the conflict weight beyond personal grudges. Xiaohu's role as an outsider becomes even more interesting in that context. He doesn't have the same incentives. He's not protecting a legacy. He's protecting a person. That's why he becomes dangerous to them. Not because he's the strongest fighter in the room, but because he's not playing by their rules. He's not bribable in the usual ways. He's not threatened by reputation in the same way. He doesn't fear social embarrassment. It's like trying to intimidate a storm with a fine. But the show also makes it clear that outsiders can be manipulated in different ways. Xiaohu can be baited with honor. He can be baited with duty. He can be baited with love. And the conspiracy forces him to confront that. It forces him to ask, am I acting because I'm wise, or because I'm emotionally reactive? That distinction matters, and the drama puts him through situations where he has to learn it the hard way. If I had one small critique in this section of the drama, it's that sometimes the conspiracy mechanics feel like they're being kept intentionally vague, like the show wants the vibe of conspiracy more than the clarity of it. And for me personally, I'm okay with that because I'm watching for character and relationship tension, not because I need a perfectly mapped out corporate family chessboard. But I know some viewers want sharper logistics. They want to know who did what, when, how, why. Sang Ahli Pengawal gives you enough to feel the threat, but it doesn't always satisfy the part of your brain that wants a clean diagram. And yet, in a weird way, that vagueness can enhance the paranoia. Because real-life conspiracies, real-life power plays, often feel vague to the people being targeted. You don't get a neat villain monologue. You get a pattern. You get a sense of being boxed in. You get whispered warnings and missing information. So even though I can critique the clarity, I can also defend the choice as emotionally effective. Here's a rehook that I think captures why the middle stretch kept me hooked. What happens when the safest person in your life becomes the biggest variable? Because Xiaohu's devotion is stable, but his evolution isn't. Lanxin can't predict him the way she predicts her staff. And Xiaohu can't predict her world the way he predicts physical threat. So both of them are constantly recalibrating. One of my favorite craft choices is how the show uses proximity as character development. Early on, Xiaohu keeps a professional distance. It's controlled. It's, I'm here to guard. As the story goes, he starts to slip closer, not just physically, but emotionally. He starts to react not only to threats but to her feelings. And Lanxin, who is used to distance, starts to tolerate closeness in small doses. The drama tracks that with blocking. Where people stand in a room. Who sits first? Who turns away first? It's not flashy, but it's effective. And that's where the acting really has to do heavy lifting. Because a lot of the romance is in what they don't say. Xiaohu's actor sells longing through restraint. You can see him choosing not to speak. Choosing not to demand. Choosing not to lean in. That's not easy. It's actually easier to play romance as boldness. Restraint requires control. Lanxin's actor, meanwhile, sells conflict through micro-expressions. She'll hold eye contact like a weapon, and then her gaze will flicker for just a moment, like her heart betrayed her. Those are the details that make a slow-build romance feel alive instead of stagnant. The show's sound choices help here, too. It will often let you hear small things in intimate scenes, a swallow, a breath, a sleeve shifting. Those sounds become emotional punctuation. When there's silence between them, you're not bored, you're listening. That's a really specific kind of tension that some dramas mess up by drowning it in music. This one mostly trusts the actors. I want to circle back to the mother awakening plot thread because it's the kind of element that could have been purely melodramatic, like, here's a sad thing to make the hero sympathetic, and then it gets resolved as a convenient happy moment. Ahli Pengawal uses it, at least in the way it sits in the story, as a pressure point for Xiaohu's identity. 10 years training is not just a flex. It implies sacrifice and obsession. It implies that Xiaohu has been chasing a purpose so hard he may have postponed his own emotional life. His mother's state is like a physical manifestation of that postponement. Something frozen. Something waiting. And when the story moves toward waking her, it's not just about medical miracle vibes. It's about Xiaohu confronting what he's been running from. Because if his mother awakens, then the story can't pretend he's just a lone warrior drifting through life. He becomes someone's son again. He becomes accountable to family. That changes how he sees love. It changes what he can offer Lanxin. It adds a layer of complexity. Can he build a life with Lanxin while also carrying the needs of his past? Lanxin's response to that, again, without inventing exact dialogue or scenes, matters a lot. The drama has an opportunity here to either make her the jealous love interest, threatened by his family attachments, or make her the partner who understands that love includes history. The way the show frames Lanxin's character, I lean toward the latter being the intent. She's not written as childish. She's written as pressured. So when she faces Xiaohu's past, it's less, I want all of you for myself, and more, I'm afraid I can't fit into the parts of your life I didn't witness. And that fear is relatable. It's one of those adult relationship fears people don't talk about enough. The idea that someone had a whole life before you, with wounds you didn't cause and can't fully heal, and you're entering mid-story. Love doesn't erase the previous chapters. It has to live with them. Now, let me be honest about something that might be another contrarian-ish take. I actually think the drama is at its best when it slows down. Not when it's doing the biggest action beats. The action is cool, sure. The tension is fun. But the scenes that lingered in my mind were the quiet ones where you can feel the cost. The aftermath scenes. The scenes where Lanxin tries to do normal things, work, lead, maintain composure, while you can see that she's internally rewriting her understanding of safety. The scenes where Xiaohu is alone for a moment and you can see that his protector identity is starting to swallow him. Because that's the emotional danger, right? Xiaohu came down the mountain searching for love, but he might end up defining love as work, as protection, as labor. And if love becomes labor, what happens to joy? What happens to playfulness? What happens to mutuality? The drama nudges at this by giving glimpses of what they could be if the world calmed down. Brief moments where Lanxin laughs more freely. Brief moments where Xiaohu looks less like a sentry and more like a young man. Those moments are like oxygen. And because they are rare, they hit harder. There's this one kind of visual the show uses that I kept noticing: reflections. Mirrors, glass walls, car windows at night. People seen through layers. And I think it's not just an aesthetic. It's a metaphor for how these characters experience each other. Lanxin is always seeing herself reflected back through public perception. Xiaohu is always seeing danger reflected back through his vigilance. Neither of them gets a direct view of reality, it's always filtered. When they're together in a private space, the camera sometimes reduces those reflective surfaces, letting them be more direct. That's the show saying, this is the closest thing to truth they have. Editing-wise, I mentioned earlier that the show likes interruption. It also likes parallelism. It will cut between Lanxin in her world and Xiaohu in his, showing you how their mental states differ in the same moment. And that helps you empathize with both. When Lanxin snaps or pushes him away emotionally, you understand she's trying to breathe. When Xiaohu becomes rigid or controlling, you understand he's trying to prevent catastrophe. Those are not excuses, but they are context. And context is what makes conflict feel meaningful rather than contrived. Now, I want to talk about chemistry in a slightly different way, because a lot of people use chemistry like it's just, do they look good together? For me, chemistry is about whether two actors create a third thing in the room. A tension that feels alive. A sense that if you left them alone, they'd still have something to talk about. Sang Ahli Pengawal's leads have that. Their chemistry isn't only sexual or only emotional. It's structural. Their presence changes each other's behavior. That's why it works. Lanxin becomes more honest around Xiaohu, even when she's trying not to. Xiaohu becomes more uncertain around Lanxin, even when he wants to be steady. That push and pull is compelling. It creates scenes where you're not sure who is leading emotionally. Sometimes Lanxin is the one holding the line. Sometimes Xiaohu is the one refusing to step back. Sometimes they switch mid-scene. That unpredictability is what keeps it from feeling like a simple, strong man, fragile woman fantasy. And because the audience is newcomers here, I want to emphasize, you don't need to know any genre history to appreciate this. Even if you've never watched a bodyguard romance before, the show explains its emotional stakes through behavior. You learn who they are by how they react, not by exposition dumps. That's good writing. Okay, quick human detour. I found myself doing that thing where you pause the show for a second and just stare at your screen like, why am I this stressed? I'm sitting on my couch. That's how you know suspense is working. My snacks were untouched. Unheard of. If a drama makes me forget chips exist, it's doing something right. But suspense without payoff can be exhausting, so the drama needs emotional release valves. One of the main release valves is Xiaohu's sincerity. Another is the gradual shift in Lanxin's trust. And the show is careful not to make trust a one-time event. It's not like she trusts him and that's it. Trust is tested repeatedly. Sometimes it grows. Sometimes it regresses. That's realistic. Trust isn't a staircase, it's a tide. And when the drama leans into the idea of conspiracy, it tests trust not just between them but around them. Who is safe? Who is pretending? Who has hidden loyalties? Even without naming specific side characters, you can feel the environment becoming less reliable. The world becomes a place where information is a weapon. That forces Lanxin and Xiaohu to become more inward with each other, which is romantic, but also dangerous, because isolation can create dependency. The show flirts with that edge, the idea that they might be each other's only safe person. That can be beautiful, and it can be unhealthy. The drama doesn't fully moralize it, but it shows the tension. Here's a rehook that kept me watching late at night when I absolutely should have been asleep. Is love still love if it's built in a cage? Because as threats close in, their intimacy grows, but it grows under duress. The drama keeps asking whether their feelings are authentic or adrenaline-induced. And it doesn't insult the characters by assuming they can answer that immediately. It lets them be confused. It lets them make mistakes. Now, I want to zoom out a little and talk about what the show is really about under the plot, because this is where my loved it stance becomes more than just it entertained me. Under the Assassins and Rivals, Sang Ahli Pengawal is about identity formation. Xiaohu has an identity handed to him by training, protector, warrior, disciplined man. Lanxin has an identity shaped by success, director, leader, symbol of competence. Both identities are roles. Both are armor. And the story pressures them until the armor cracks, because love demands a self underneath the role. Xiaohu has to learn he can be loved for more than usefulness. Lanxin has to learn she can be loved even when she's not performing competence. That's the emotional thesis. And it hits because it's universal. You don't have to be a bodyguard or a director to understand what it feels like to hide behind a role. And the drama also has a quiet commentary about class and power. Xiaohu comes from a place of training and simplicity. Lanxin comes from a world of status. Their romance is not just personal, it's cross-cultural in a sense. He brings a moral clarity that can feel like judgment to her. She brings a pragmatism that can feel like compromise to him. They have to negotiate values, not just feelings. This negotiation is where the best dialogue scenes live. They are not always romantic lines. Sometimes they are arguments about method. About trust. About whether the ends justify the means. Lanxin, being embedded in a power system, may accept certain tactics as normal. Xiaohu may see those tactics as betrayal of principle. Those fights are good because they are not petty. They are about worldview. If there's a weakness, it's that sometimes the drama leans a bit too heavily on Xiaohu's purity as a solution. Like, his integrity inspires others, his honesty cuts through deceit. That's satisfying, but it can also feel like the show is flirting with the idea that personal virtue is enough to defeat systemic corruption. In real life, it rarely is. The drama does complicate this by showing that he needs strategy, allies, and adaptation. But the moral clarity is still treated like a superpower at times. And I'm not mad at it. This is a drama, not a documentary. But I do think it's worth noting, because it affects how you interpret the success ending promise. If success comes too easily because the hero is righteous, it can cheapen the struggle. Sang Ahli Pengawal mostly avoids that by making him pay emotionally. Even when he wins, he loses something: sleep, peace, innocence, simplicity. The show makes victory expensive. Now, let's talk about the romance beats without spoiling the biggest ones. The relationship evolves through a series of turning points that feel motivated by external threat and internal need. You'll see moments where Lanxin's facade slips and Xiaohu witnesses it. You'll see moments where Xiaohu's composure breaks and Lanxin witnesses it. Each witness moment is a brick in the foundation. And what I love is that the show doesn't always immediately resolve the emotional fallout. Sometimes someone sees something vulnerable and then pretends they didn't. Because acknowledging it would change the relationship, and change is scary. That dynamic creates a delicious frustration as a viewer. You're like, say it. Just say it. But then you realize the show is portraying something real. Adults often don't confess feelings because feelings aren't just feelings. They are commitments. They are consequences. If Lanxin admits she cares, she risks giving enemies leverage. If Xiaohu admits he's in love, he risks losing professionalism, risking her safety, risking his sense of purpose if she doesn't reciprocate. Love in a dangerous environment isn't just romantic, it's tactical. That's what makes it tense. And the show's direction often frames these almost confessions like standoffs. Two people facing each other, both armed with silence. The camera lingers just long enough to make you uncomfortable, and then it cuts away right before the words come. That can be infuriating if you hate slow burn. For me, it's addictive. Because it's not slow burn for the sake of delaying kisses. It's slow burn because the characters have real reasons to hesitate. Let me paint another mini-scene, more sensory than specific. It's late. The world is quiet, but not safe quiet. More like the quiet you get when you know something could happen. Lanxin is in a dim space, the kind where shadows gather at corners. She's holding herself together the way people do when they refuse to fall apart. Xiaohu is nearby, not hovering, but close enough to catch her if she collapses. There's a faint hum from outside, maybe traffic, maybe city life continuing without them. And for a moment, Lanxin's breath catches. Not a sob. Just that tiny hitch when you're trying not to cry. Xiaohu hears it. His face shifts. He wants to fix it. He wants to do something. But he can't fight fear with his fists. He can only be there. So he says something simple. Not a speech. Not a promise that everything will be fine. Just something like an anchor. And Lanxin doesn't respond right away. She stares at nothing. Then she exhales, slowly, like she's letting herself be human for 5 seconds. The camera doesn't dramatize it. It just observes. And you, as the viewer, feel the intimacy not because they touched, but because she allowed him to witness her unarmored. That's the romance. That's the payoff. And the show earns those beats. Now, I want to touch on the action and choreography more directly, because if you're coming for that, you'll be happy. The show generally avoids making fights feel like dance performances that ignore stakes. Even when the choreography is clean, it keeps an element of scramble. Of urgency. It emphasizes impact. It emphasizes reaction. And, crucially, it often shows Lanxin's perspective during danger, not just Xiaohu's. That matters. It keeps the violence from becoming purely spectacle. It reminds you that the person being protected is experiencing terror, confusion, and loss of control. The cinematography during action tends to prioritize clarity over hypercut chaos. That's something I appreciate. I can't stand when a show uses 1,000 cuts to hide weak choreography. Here, when something happens, you usually understand spatially what is going on, even if the camera gets close. And when it does go shaky or tight, it feels motivated, like the show wants you to feel disorientation. Music during action sequences tends to be pulse-based rather than melodic. It's like a heartbeat. And that's a smart choice, because it ties the suspense to the body. Again, you're not just watching danger, you're feeling it. Now, let's talk about Lanxin's competence again, because as the stakes rise, the drama has to prove she's more than a target. And it does, often through her decision-making. She's not a fighter, at least not in the physical sense implied by Xiaohu's training, but she fights with strategy. With authority. With negotiation. She understands networks. She understands leverage. And when she starts working alongside Xiaohu instead of simply being escorted, the story becomes more satisfying. This is where the success theme gets interesting. Lanxin is already successful by conventional standards, but the drama suggests she hasn't been successful at protecting herself emotionally. Xiaohu, meanwhile, becomes successful in a worldly sense through his association with her and through his own heroism, but he hasn't been successful at living. They each fill a gap in the other, and the show is careful, mostly, to avoid making that gap filling feel like codependency. It tries to make it feel like growth. Like partnership. But I will say, there's a fine line here, and the drama sometimes walks it with shaky footing. There are moments where Xiaohu's protectiveness could be read as romantic destiny, and I wish the show had given Lanxin an extra beat to assert her needs more explicitly. Not because she's weak, but because it would strengthen the love story. Romance is sexier when both people choose it with clear eyes. The show implies her choice through behavior and trust, but sometimes I wanted a clearer articulation. That's a taste thing. Some viewers love the unsaid approach. I do too, up to a point. Here's another rehook. Because this is where the narrative gets juiciest, when the conspiracy starts to unravel. Who do they become when the adrenaline is no longer enough to carry them? Because in the middle stretch, danger is constant, which can make devotion feel inevitable. But eventually, the story has to confront what remains when the crisis shifts. And that's where character arcs either pay off or collapse. Sang Ahli Pengawal seems aware of this. It starts planting seeds of who Xiaohu is outside of protection. What he wants besides keeping Lanxin alive. What kind of life he imagines. And those seeds often connect back to his mother. His origin. His decade of training. The show is basically saying, you can't build a future on emergency mode forever. Lanxin's arc similarly starts tilting towards self-definition beyond her job. Being a director is her armor, but also her identity. If the conspiracy threatens her position, it threatens her sense of self. And watching her navigate that is compelling, because you see her confronting the possibility of losing the thing that made her, her. That's existential. And Xiaohu's presence in that confrontation is complicated. He can offer support, but he can't replace her identity. She has to choose who she is. The production design supports this identity theme subtly. Lanxin's spaces are often curated, controlled, like environments designed to project competence. When she's forced into less controlled spaces, whether because of threat or necessity, you feel the vulnerability. Xiaohu's spaces, when you get glimpses of his world, tend to be simpler, more functional. The contrast tells you who has been living for appearance and who has been living for survival. And as they influence each other, you can feel their worlds blending. Lanxin's environment becomes less sterile in emotional scenes. Xiaohu's presence becomes more integrated into her world. It's like their lives are being stitched together in the background. Now, let me address something newcomers might worry about. Is this drama overly melodramatic? Does it do the classic misunderstanding loops? From my experience watching it, the show avoids the worst kind of manufactured misunderstandings. Conflicts arise from real differences, values, trauma responses, power dynamics, fear. Not from someone overhearing half a sentence behind a door and running away for 3 episodes. Thank you. I'm allergic to that. That said, it is still a drama. People do withhold information. People do make emotional decisions under stress. But it tends to feel motivated by safety concerns and trust issues rather than pure plot padding. Pacing-wise, the show's midsection can feel dense because it's juggling action, romance, corporate, family conflict, and Xiaohu's personal thread with his mother. Sometimes you can feel the strain of balancing multiple threads. Certain scenes might feel like they exist to keep a subplot warm rather than because the immediate moment demands it. But overall, I think the show manages momentum by ensuring every thread ties back to the central relationship. Even when you're dealing with conspiracy, it's ultimately about how that conspiracy shapes Lanxin and Xiaohu's choices. One thing I kept appreciating is that the drama doesn't treat love as a magical shield. The danger doesn't stop because they care about each other. If anything, it intensifies because caring creates vulnerability. That's a mature choice. Too many romances use love as an escape from conflict. This show uses love as the thing that makes conflict sharper. And because of that, the emotional stakes feel real. There are moments where you can tell the writers are not just aiming for shit moments. They are aiming for tension you can feel in your gut. The kind where you're scared not just of physical harm, but of emotional harm. The fear that Lanxin will push Xiaohu away because she's afraid of needing him. The fear that Xiaohu will sacrifice himself emotionally until there's nothing left of him. The fear that the world will force them into choices that make love impossible. Now, let's talk about the success part of the storyline, because it's easy to roll your eyes at he gets love and success as an ending promise. But the show builds towards success as earned transformation. Xiaohu starts as someone trained in isolation, possibly socially inexperienced, emotionally inexperienced, and he ends up navigating a complex world, thwarting conspiracies, and stepping into a broader life. That's success. Not just money or status, but integration into society with a sense of self. Lanxin's success is also reframed. It's not just corporate success. It becomes personal survival, emotional openness, perhaps even redefining what she wants from life beyond maintaining her position. The show suggests that true success isn't being untouchable, it's being able to be touched without falling apart. That's a beautiful idea, and the drama expresses it through the slow thaw in Lanshin's performance. And then there's the mother thread, which in a way is the ultimate awakening metaphor. Xiaohu's mother awakening parallels Xiaohu awakening emotionally. It parallels Lanshin awakening to vulnerability. It parallels the truth of the conspiracy coming to light. The show loves awakening as a theme. Awakening from sleep, from denial, from role-playing. Here's the rehook I'll leave hanging in your mind as we keep moving through the later arcs, when everything finally starts to come to the surface, when the conspiracy is no longer just a shadow. Do these two become stronger together, or do they finally see that their love was forged in crisis and might not survive peace? Because that question is what makes the later stretch so tense, and it's why I couldn't just treat this as a fun watch. It actually made me think about how relationships form under stress. I've had friendships that felt intense because we were in a hard season together, and then when life calmed down, the connection changed. Not because it was fake, but because the context was gone. Ahli Pengawal plays with that same fear. It makes you wonder what's real, what's situational, what's lasting. And this is also where the show's emotional honesty sneaks up on you again. Xiaohu's desire for love is simple, but as he gets closer to actually having it, you see the fear. The fear that he's not enough outside of his usefulness. The fear that if he stops protecting, he'll stop mattering. That's a painfully human fear. Lanshin's fear is different, the fear that if she lets love in, she'll lose control, lose face, lose safety. And both fears make sense. A lot of the later tension comes from the fact that both of them are right. Xiaohu is right that the world is dangerous and caution matters. Lanshin is right that living under constant control isn't living. The drama doesn't pick a side easily. It lets them collide. It lets them negotiate. It lets them hurt each other and then repair, not because repair is guaranteed, but because repair is what love demands if it's real. And because the show is also a thriller, it uses that emotional conflict to heighten suspense. When they argue, you don't just fear an emotional breakup, you fear practical consequences. You fear that a rift will be exploited by enemies. You fear that misalignment will create a security gap. The romance isn't separate from the plot, it's part of the security system. That's smart structure. Now, I want to talk a little more about how the show depicts competence and vulnerability in men, because that's another theme I think is quietly present. Xiaohu is hyper-competent physically. But emotionally, he's learning. And the drama doesn't mock him for that. It doesn't treat emotional fluency as weakness. It treats it as growth. Xiaohu's journey is partly about learning to articulate what he wants. Not just, I will protect you, but, I want you. I care. I'm afraid. That's hard for a character trained to be stoic. And Lanshin's journey is partly about allowing herself to be cared for without feeling diminished. That's hard for a woman who has likely had to fight to be taken seriously. The show is basically exploring how power and vulnerability can coexist without cancelling each other out. If you've ever been the strong one in your friend group or family, the one who handles everything, you'll recognize Lanshin's resistance. The idea that if you lean on someone, you might never get your balance back. The show gives that fear room. It doesn't just cure it with romance. It shows that it's a process. Okay, let's get a bit nerdy, but in a normal human way, about camera language, because Ahli Pengawal uses a lot of over-the-shoulder framing that subtly changes throughout. Early on, Lanshin is often framed with Xiaohu partially obscuring her, like he's literally between her and the world. It visually reinforces the protector role. As she gains agency and as their relationship becomes more equal, the framing shifts. You see more side-by-side compositions. You see more shots where Lanshin is foreground and Xiaohu is background, still present but not dominating the frame. That's not just aesthetics, that's character progression. Lighting also shifts. Lanshin's world starts cold, and the show gradually introduces warmer practical lights in scenes where she's emotionally open. Again, not every scene, not magically, but enough that you feel the mood change. Xiaohu's presence often brings warmer tones, but there are moments where his world becomes colder too, when his protectiveness becomes rigid, when he steps deeper into conspiracy and danger. The show is telling you, his innocence is being challenged. The soundtrack, while restrained, also uses repetition in a way that builds familiarity. Certain tension pulses return, not as a loud theme but as a recognizable emotional cue. When you hear it, your body goes, something's off. That's effective conditioning. And when the show chooses not to use it in a scene where you expect it, it creates dread. That's smart sound design. Now, I want to be fair about pacing again, because loving a drama doesn't mean pretending it never dragged. There are moments where the show could have tightened transitions. Sometimes it lingers on reaction shots a bit too long, or it repeats an emotional beat without adding new information. But because the central relationship is so compelling, I didn't mind as much. If you're here primarily for plot mechanics, those moments might test your patience. If you're here for mood and character, you'll probably be fine. There's also a tonal balance the show has to manage, mountain-trained sincerity versus modern corporate realism. Occasionally, Xiaohu's earnestness could feel almost too pure for the gritty conspiracy environment. But I think that's a feature, not a bug. The drama is built on that contrast. It wants you to see how sincerity can be disruptive. It wants you to see how a person who hasn't been socialized into cynicism reacts to cynicism. That's part of the story's charm. And again, as a viewer with some skepticism about protector romance, I appreciated that the drama doesn't always treat Xiaohu's protectiveness as unquestionably correct. There are scenes where you can tell the show is asking you to question him. Is he protecting her, or protecting his own need to feel needed? Is he listening, or deciding? That self-interrogation is what makes the romance feel more mature than the premise suggests. Here's another rehook, because this is the point where viewers usually pick a side. Do you want Xiaohu to stay pure and principled, or do you want him to get a little dirty to survive? Because the drama is going to push him toward compromise, and your reaction to that will shape how you feel about the second half. I'm personally a sucker for characters who struggle with compromise. I don't need my hero to stay spotless. I need him to stay accountable. And Ahli Pengawal, from what it sets up, seems to understand accountability as part of love. If Xiaohu crosses lines, it matters. If Lanxin makes cold decisions, it matters. The show doesn't always punish them, but it makes you feel the weight. And that weight is what makes the love and success outcome feel earned rather than handed out. Because success here isn't just, they win. It's, they become people who can live with what they did to survive. That's a darker, more interesting idea than simple victory. Now let's talk about how the drama uses the idea of family. Rival family is an external threat, yes, but family also shows up as internal obligation. Xiaohu's mother represents family as responsibility and longing. Lanxin's world of rival families represents family as power and inheritance. These are two different family concepts colliding. One is intimate and emotional. One is political and strategic. Their romance sits between those concepts, trying to become its own family unit. That's why it feels so high stakes. They are not just dating. They are trying to build a safe home in a world that weaponizes homes. And the show visually emphasizes this with interior spaces. Safe rooms, offices, cars, hallways. So much of the drama happens in transitional spaces, not in open fields. It reinforces the feeling of being contained. Even when they are outside, the camera often frames them with structures around them, making the world feel like it's closing in. It's a visual metaphor for how trapped they are by circumstance. When the show does give them open space, again, rare, and I'm not going to claim a specific location, it feels like relief. It feels like breath. Those moments are important because they show what peace could be. And because they are rare, they hurt. You start to mourn peace before it's even gone. And that's the emotional trick the show pulls. It makes you care about peace as much as you care about love. You're not just rooting for them to be together, you're rooting for them to be safe enough to be normal. That's a different kind of romantic investment. One more thing about Lanxin, The drama doesn't infantilize her desire for control. It shows that her control is how she survived. And it shows that letting go of control isn't just romantic surrender, it's terrifying. So when she does let Xiaohu in, it's not weak. It's brave. And the actor sells that bravery through the smallest shifts, relaxing shoulders, softer voice, slower blinking. Those details matter. Xiaohu's bravery is more obvious in action scenes, but the show also frames emotional bravery as harder for him. Saying what he wants. Admitting fear. Allowing Lanxin to take risks. That's the kind of growth that makes a protector character interesting. Otherwise, they are just a wall. A hot wall, maybe, but still a wall. And I'll be honest, I ended up more emotionally invested in their communication than in the conspiracy itself. Not because the conspiracy is bad, but because the conspiracy is a mechanism. The relationship is the story. The conspiracy is the furnace. The furnace is there to test the metal. And the metal is them. There's a point later, again, not specifying exact plot, where the show shifts from protect her from immediate threats to take down the source of the threats. That's where Xiaohu becomes more proactive. It's also where Lanxin has to decide how far she's willing to go. Because dismantling a conspiracy isn't clean. It means stepping into conflict intentionally. It means making choices that could harm others. It means sacrificing some innocence. And the show frames that choice as heavy, not heroic. That's good. It doesn't treat justice like a victory lap. It treats it like a burden. Now, I want to touch on the concept of cure in the drama. There are two forms of cure implied. One is waking the mother. The other is curing loneliness. And the drama is careful not to present Lanxin as a cure for Xiaohu or Xiaohu as a cure for Lanxin. They help each other, yes. They awaken each other, yes. But the show generally avoids the toxic idea that love fixes everything. Threats still exist. Trauma still exists. Their personalities still exist. They don't become different people. They become more themselves. That's why I found the romance satisfying. It wasn't about erasing flaws. It was about seeing flaws and still choosing to stay, while also insisting on growth. Here's the rehook that, for me, defines why the second half works when it works. When the drama starts promising love and success, do you trust it not to cheapen the pain it put them through? Because some shows do that. They torture characters for 20 hours and then slap on a happy ending like a sticker. Ahli Pengawal, from its tone and craft, seems like it wants the happy parts to be complicated. It wants joy to carry scars. It wants success to have a cost. And I respect that. I respect a show that doesn't insult the journey. Now, I'm going to zoom in on one more aspect, the way the drama uses threat to reveal tenderness. There's a particular kind of tenderness that only exists after danger, when your body is still shaking and you're pretending you're fine. The show captures that in small gestures. A hand hovering near someone's shoulder but not touching. A jacket offered. A glass of water placed quietly. A gaze held too long. Those are intimate acts that don't require confession. They are safe intimacy, because they can be explained as practicality. But the viewer knows better. The characters know better. That's the fun. And the show's editing often lets these gestures land. It doesn't rush past them. It gives you a beat. A breath. That's how you build romance without constant kissing scenes. You build it with attention. The attention theme is big. Xiaohu's attention is protective. Lanxin's attention is usually strategic. When she starts paying attention to him emotionally, that's love. When he starts paying attention to her autonomy, that's love. They learn each other. Now, because this is a drama review and not just me being emotional on camera, I also want to acknowledge the genre expectations. Some viewers come into a bodyguard romance expecting certain tropes. Close calls. Forced proximity. Jealous rivals. Big sacrifices. Ahli Pengawal plays with those tropes, but what makes it feel fresher is that it uses them to explore trust and identity rather than just to generate hot moments. The hot moments exist, sure, but they are not empty. They are loaded. And in terms of production value, it feels like a 2026 drama in the best way. Clean visuals. Thoughtful color grading. Costumes that communicate class and personality. Locations that feel lived in rather than like empty sets. The show's world has texture. You believe Lanshin's corporate environment. You believe Xiaohu's outsiderness. That matters because immersion is half the battle. One last small critique I'll add here: sometimes the show's desire to keep things tense means it doesn't give side relationships much room to breathe. The world can feel like it exists mostly to pressure the leads. Again, that's not a deal breaker for me because the leads are strong, but if you like rich ensemble dynamics, you might find it a little narrow. The focus is intense. It's a two-person pressure cooker more than a sprawling society drama. But that focus is also why it hits. It keeps you locked into their emotional reality. It doesn't let you escape into side stories when things get uncomfortable. You sit with them. And as the story pushes closer to its endgame, where conspiracies are confronted, threats are unraveled, and personal threads like Xiaohu's mother reach their emotional apex, you can feel the show preparing to answer its central question: can love survive being used as leverage? Because once enemies realize love exists, love becomes a target. And the drama, being as tense as it is, doesn't let that realization stay theoretical. You start to feel the noose tighten not just around Lanshin's safety but around their bond. And the thing that makes it genuinely compelling is that the solution isn't just be stronger. The solution has to be smarter, be honest, be aligned, be willing to risk something. And alignment is hard when two people come from different worlds. Which is why the most suspenseful scenes aren't always fight scenes. Sometimes they are decision scenes. The moment Lanshin chooses a strategy. The moment Xiaohu chooses whether to obey or challenge. The moment they decide whether to tell each other something that could change how they trust. Those moments are where the relationship either becomes real partnership or collapses into protector and protected, and the show keeps you living on that edge. And right when the narrative starts leaning into that partnership possibility, it also starts testing it with the kind of pressure that exposes cracks you didn't know were there. Because when the stakes escalate beyond one assassination attempt into something that threatens Lanshin's entire position and Xiaohu's sense of purpose, the choices stop being about what's safest and start being about what's worth it. And that's when Xiaohu's old training clashes with his new heart, because training says minimize risk, but love says some risks are the point, and Lanshin, who has always treated risk like a calculated business decision, suddenly finds herself facing a risk that can't be quantified, the risk of letting someone matter enough that losing them would destroy her, and you can see her start to weigh that in silence. You can see her try to talk herself out of caring because caring is dangerous, and Xiaohu can feel that withdrawal like a physical step backward, and he doesn't know whether to respect her space or fight for closeness, and the drama holds that tension right up to the moment where he finally decides that being a bodyguard isn't enough anymore, that if he's going to protect her and keep his own soul intact, he has to become something else entirely, something that can stand in the storm and not just absorb it. And that decision is where the show starts to pivot into its most emotionally risky territory, because it forces Lanshin to ask herself whether she fell in love with the man who followed orders, or the man who is now willing to break the rules for her, and she hasn't answered that yet, not really, not out loud, not even fully in her own head, because the moment she answers it, she'll have to live with what it means. She'll have to live with the fact that love might be making her complicit in choices she used to judge, and Xiaohu, watching her hesitate, starts to realize that the love he came down the mountain searching for might not look like acceptance, it might look like negotiation. Might look like hard conversations, it might look like her telling him no, and him having to stay anyway, not as a martyr, but as a man who finally understands that protecting someone's life is easy compared to protecting their right to choose. And he is right on the edge of learning that lesson in the most painful possible way when the story pushes them into a turning point where the conspiracy stops being a backdrop and becomes a direct ultimatum, and Lanshin has to make a call that will either pull Xiaohu fully into her world or force him to step away from her side at the exact moment he wants to be closest, and he can't stop her from making it without becoming the kind of man he promised himself he wouldn't be. And that's when his hands, steady in every fight, start to shake for the first time, because for once, the danger isn't coming from an assassin. It's coming from the possibility that love might require him to let go, and he opens his mouth to say something that could change everything, and what comes out is a sentence that isn't poetic, isn't smooth, and honestly isn't even what you expect from a guy who can supposedly stay calm under any pressure. It comes out plain human. Something along the lines of him admitting that he doesn't know what the right move is anymore, that he can handle blades and fists but he can't handle the idea of losing her because of a decision he forced or a decision he failed to respect, and you can hear the rawness in it because it's not a hero line. It's a man realizing that love has dragged him into a kind of fear his training never prepared him for. And that's where Sang Ahli Pengawal really starts flexing its emotional intelligence, because it doesn't treat that admission like a weakness that needs to be corrected. It treats it like maturity. Xiaohu finally stops pretending he can control everything. Lanxin finally stops pretending she can outthink everything. The drama doesn't suddenly become calm, obviously. The threats are still there. The rival family pressure is still there. The conspiracy is still moving. But something shifts internally. They stop fighting the fact that they are affected. They start acting like two people who are allowed to be scared and still move forward. What I loved about this turning point is that it reframes the bodyguard fantasy. It's no longer, he protects her because he's strong. It becomes, he protects her while respecting that she is a person who gets to choose her own risks. And that's a much harder kind of protection. That's protection without ownership. Protection without entitlement. Protection that doesn't swallow the other person's life. There's a small but powerful directing choice around here that I kept thinking about afterward. In a lot of earlier scenes, Xiaohu's body is positioned like a barrier. He's the wall. He's the shield. As the story tilts into partnership, the blocking changes. He starts standing slightly behind her in some situations, not because he's passive, but because he's letting her face the room as herself. He's still there. He's still ready. But he's no longer consuming her space. Visually, it's the difference between guarding someone and backing them up. That's a subtle shift that tells you the relationship is evolving even before the dialogue says it. And Lanxin, for her part, starts making room for him as a person. Not just as an employee. Not just as a function. She starts noticing his moods, his fatigue, the emotional load he's carrying. And you might think, well, obviously, that's romance, but it's actually more than that. It's reciprocity. It's the show insisting that if love is going to be real, it can't be one person constantly saving the other. It has to be mutual care. Here's the question that kept hitting me in the chest in these later arcs: can Lanxin love Xiaohu in a way that doesn't turn him into a tool, and can Xiaohu love Lanxin in a way that doesn't turn her into a project? Because both of those failures are easy. They are seductive. They even look noble from the outside. I'm protecting you. I'm providing for you. I'm keeping you safe. I'm giving you purpose. Those are all dangerous phrases if they replace actual listening. Sang Ahli Pengawal doesn't always get this perfect, but it tries. And the trying matters. You can feel the writers aiming for a love story that's adult enough to acknowledge power dynamics, even while delivering the genre thrills. Now, since we're moving deeper into the story's later stretch, I want to talk about the thwarting the conspiracy part in a way that's honest without pretending I know the exact chess moves beyond what we're given. The show builds toward a sense of exposure. Not just, we fight the bad guys, but we reveal something rotten. There's a gradual tightening where the conspiracy stops being a series of isolated threats and starts feeling like one coordinated machine. And the drama does that thing good thrillers do: it makes you feel like the walls are closer than you thought. Like the enemy isn't just outside the door, it might be in the building. What impressed me is that the show doesn't resolve this with one magic moment of competence. It frames it as a sustained effort. Xiaohu has to adapt. Lanxin has to leverage her position and intelligence. The show acknowledges that conspiracies don't fall because one man is brave. They fall because people take risks, share information, refuse to be silenced, and sometimes accept that the process will get ugly before it gets clean. Even in a drama that wants to be romantic and satisfying, it doesn't entirely sanitize the mess of taking power away from powerful people. And the rival family element, in particular, keeps the pressure intimate. Rival families aren't faceless systems, they are social ecosystems. They come with history, pride, entitlement. They come with a sense of, we deserve to win. That entitlement is what makes them so dangerous. The show frames that entitlement as cold and efficient. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's just relentless. That's scarier than someone screaming evil lines. In terms of pacing, the final stretch before the endgame tends to accelerate. Scenes get tighter. Transitions get sharper. The editing becomes more forward-leaning, like it's pushing you along with the characters. And this is where the show's earlier, interruption style, pays off. Because you've already been trained not to relax. So when the plot starts sprinting, you're ready. Your nervous system is ready. You're basically conditioned to watch like a prey animal. I mean that as a compliment. It's immersive. There's also a change in the way the show uses music here. Earlier, it was restraint and pulse. Later, you start hearing more emotional swells at key moments. Not constantly, not syrupy, but placed where the story is asking you to feel the weight of choices. And when it does swell, it feels earned because it's been holding back for so long. It's like the show finally allows itself to sing. Here's another rehook, because this is where the drama separates casual enjoyment from full investment. When the story starts offering solutions, do they actually feel like solutions, or do they feel like compromises that leave scars? Because the most satisfying endings are rarely clean. They are honest. Now, I want to pivot to Xiaohu's mother awakening, because even though the storyline tells us that happens, what matters is what it does emotionally. The mother thread is one of those narrative elements that carries a lot of symbolic weight, and the drama uses it as a mirror to Xiaohu's internal state. For most of the story, Xiaohu is awake physically and asleep emotionally, in the sense that he's functioning but not fully living. He's been trained to suppress wants. He's been trained to act. Coming down the mountain searching for love is his first attempt at waking up emotionally. But that attempt is chaotic. He doesn't have the language for it. So when the story moves toward his mother awakening, it's not just a plot tick. It's the show saying, the part of him that's been frozen in grief, in unresolved longing, is finally being forced to confront reality. And that confrontation is messy. It's the kind of mess that can either deepen a relationship or break it. The way the drama frames this thread. It encourages you to see Xiaohu not as an unbreakable protector, but as someone who has been protecting himself from pain by turning pain into purpose. If his mother awakens, then his pain becomes immediate again. And that's terrifying. Sometimes we cling to unresolved situations because resolution means facing emotions we've been avoiding. The show's best emotional scenes, for me, are the ones where Xiaohu's protector identity cracks in the presence of family. He can be brave for Lanxin because bravery feels like duty. But for his mother, bravery feels like vulnerability. It's personal. It's childhood. It's raw. That's a different kind of acting challenge, and the performance rises to it when it needs to. You see the difference in how he holds his face. He's not scanning for threats. He's scanning for permission to feel. Lanxin's role around this is fascinating because it tests whether she's capable of being more than a mission in Xiaohu's life. If she can stand near this part of his story without making it about herself, that's love. If she can support him without turning it into leverage or insecurity, that's love. And the drama seems to understand that a mature romance includes witnessing each other's past without trying to rewrite it. There's a quiet tenderness in how the show stages these family-adjacent beats. It often lowers the lighting, softens the soundscape, and lets time slow down. Suddenly the thriller energy fades, and you're in a different genre for a moment. It becomes intimate drama. And those moments matter because they remind you what the fight is for. Not just survival. Not just winning against rivals. It's for the chance to be human with the people you love. And that ties directly into the show's core theme, awakening. Waking up from training. Waking up from performance. Waking up from fear. Waking up from the idea that love is a prize rather than a practice. Now, I want to talk about Lanshin as a romantic lead in the later stretch, because this is where the drama could have easily defaulted into making her purely reactive. The story escalates threats, and often writers will respond by shrinking the female lead into the person we must protect. But Sang Ahli Pengawal keeps her involved in the confrontation, at least in spirit and decision-making. She's not just being moved around. She's making calls. She's bearing consequences. The show keeps emphasizing that she's a director for a reason. She knows how to lead. She knows how to plan. She knows how to hold a room. And that matters because it makes the romance feel like a meeting of equals across different domains. Xiaohu is physically dominant in terms of survival skill. Lanshin is socially dominant in terms of navigating systems. When they start respecting each other's domain, they become stronger. When they try to override each other, they fracture. That's basically the relationship dynamic in a sentence. The later arcs also deepen Lanshin's vulnerability in a way that felt earned rather than manipulative. She doesn't become soft because the plot demands a crying scene. She becomes soft because sustained threat wears you down. Anyone who has lived through prolonged stress knows that. You can be tough for weeks, months, years, and then one day you break in the smallest moment, like someone offering you tea and you suddenly feel your throat tighten. The drama captures that kind of slow erosion, and it's one of the more realistic portrayals of strong woman under pressure I've seen in this type of genre blend. Here's the part that made me unexpectedly emotional, and I'm just going to admit it, I have a thing about characters who are high-functioning until they are alone. People who can lead a meeting, handle a crisis, stay composed, and then the second the door closes, their face changes. That hits me because I recognize it. Not at Lanshin's scale, obviously, but the emotional pattern. The show gives Lanshin those moments, and it doesn't play them for pity. It plays them for truth. Watching her slowly accept that she doesn't have to be alone in her fear genuinely got to me. I had one of those moments where you don't realize your eyes are watering until you blink and the room looks different. And then, because this is still Sang Ahli Pengawal, the show will snap you right back into danger. That whiplash is intentional. It keeps you from sinking into comfort. It keeps reminding you that love is happening under pressure, not in a safe bubble. Now let's talk about the love part in a way that stays moderate on spoilers. The storyline says Xiaohu, Marai Sinta, he achieves love. The show builds toward that in a way that feels like a gradual choice rather than an inevitable destiny. It's not just, they are attracted, so they are together. It's, they keep choosing each other under conditions that make that choice costly. And by the time love becomes explicit, it's not surprising. It's a relief. It's the moment your body unclenches because the characters finally stop pretending. But what I liked is that the show doesn't frame love as the end of conflict. Love becomes the start of a different conflict. How do we live with love in a world that punishes it? How do we protect it without turning it into a weakness? How do we keep it from becoming a cage? That's why the success ending promise has to do a lot of work. Success can't just mean they win and kiss. It has to mean they build a life that's not just a crisis response. And this is where the drama's writing choices in the late game become crucial. There's a particular tension in these types of dramas where the ending can go two ways. It can go pure fantasy, evil is defeated, love is secure, everything is bright. Or it can go bittersweet, evil is reduced but not erased, love is real but scarred, safety is partial. Sang Ahli Pengawal, in tone, feels like it wants to land in a satisfying place while still honoring the cost. It doesn't want to punish you for caring, but it also doesn't want to pretend the journey didn't matter. And the show uses its final stretch, before the actual end, to emphasize consequences. Choices have fallout. Trust has a price. Vulnerability gets exploited. Protection requires sacrifice. Not always physical sacrifice, sometimes reputational, emotional, relational. That's what gives it weight. It feels like a story about adults making adult choices rather than characters being carried by plot convenience. Now, I want to pause on something that might sound like a small detail, but it's part of why I found the show immersive, the way it depicts waiting. A lot of thrillers focus on the moment of attack. This show also focuses on the moments in between. The waiting in a car. The waiting in a hallway. The waiting outside a door. Those moments are where fear grows. And the show uses that waiting to deepen intimacy. When you wait with someone, you learn their quiet habits. You learn how they breathe when they are stressed. You learn whether they talk to fill silence or sit in it. The show builds relationship through those in-between spaces, and that's good craft. Also, can we talk about how hard it is to write a character like Xiaohu without making him corny? Like, genuinely. A mountain-trained warrior who comes down looking for love could have been unbearable if the show leaned into, "I don't understand modern life," jokes too hard. But it keeps the humor gentle and the sincerity grounded. Xiaohu isn't dumb. He's just different. He's competent in his domain and learning in others. That's why he's likable. The show respects him. It doesn't make him the butt of the joke. It makes the world the joke sometimes, because the world is absurd. And that's another quiet theme: modern power structures are ridiculous if you look at them from outside. The rival family games, the conspiracies, the social performances. Xiaohu's presence exposes the absurdity because he refuses to treat it as sacred. Lanxin, slowly, starts seeing that absurdity too. That's part of her awakening. She starts questioning the value of the mask she's worn for so long. Here's a rehook that matters if you're still with me deep into this story. When the drama heads toward its resolution, does it keep its promise that these characters are changing, or does it snap them back into tropes for convenience? Because that's the betrayal I hate most. When a show builds nuance and then throws it away at the finish line. From how Ahli Pengawal is structured and the way it treats key emotional beats, it seems committed to growth. Xiaohu doesn't end the story as the exact same man he started as. Lanxin doesn't either. Their arcs bend. Their choices reflect what they've learned. Xiaohu's growth is the most visible in how he starts listening to Lanxin's agency. Early Xiaohu might have treated her decisions as risks to be prevented. Later Xiaohu treats her decisions as facts to be supported. That's a major shift. It's also romantic in the most respectful way. Lanxin's growth is visible in how she starts letting herself be cared for without turning it into weakness. She also starts caring back in ways that don't feel like transactional reward. She doesn't just love him because he saved her. She loves him because she sees him. There's a difference. Saving creates gratitude. Seeing creates intimacy. The show aims for intimacy. Now, let's touch on something else: the show's moral stance on violence. This is not a pacifist story. Xiaohu fights. He thwarts assassination attempts. He confronts threats. Violence is part of survival here. But the show doesn't glamorize violence as the only solution. It frames violence as necessary in moments, but costly. It emphasizes that physical victory doesn't solve systemic danger. It also emphasizes that protecting someone isn't just about winning fights, it's about preventing situations from becoming fights in the first place. That's why the strategic elements matter. And this is where Lanxin's intelligence becomes crucial to the thwarting conspiracy piece. She understands systems. She understands leverage. She understands that exposing a conspiracy might require careful timing, alliances, risks with reputation. Again, I'm not going to invent the exact method. But the show frames the resolution as involving both of them. It's not Xiaohu punches the conspiracy. It's they navigate it. One thing I appreciated is that the show doesn't turn Lanxin into a suddenly physical fighter just to make her strong. Strength isn't only physical. Her strength remains in her domain. That's respectful writing. It doesn't force her to become a different archetype. It expands the one she already is. The show also plays with the idea of public versus private victory. A lot of what happens in Lanxin's world is about perception. If you win privately but lose publicly, you still lose. That's a different kind of tension than, can we survive tonight? It's, can we survive tomorrow's narrative? The show uses that to create pressure in scenes that aren't action-heavy. Sometimes the most intense moments are someone choosing words carefully, because words can kill careers, and careers can be a form of safety. So if you're someone who loves romance with teeth, who wants bodyguard stories that actually respect the emotional weight of protection, who believes love should be earned and not just handed out, this one's for you. It's not perfect, no drama is, but it's honest in a way that sneaks up on you, and once it does, you'll find yourself caring about these two people like they're real, like their choices matter, like their scars are part of the beauty. If you're on Bongo Gaming, hit subscribe if you want more deep dives like this, because I'm not done analyzing the craft that makes dramas feel alive. And if you've already watched it, tell me in the comments, did you feel the weight of their quiet moments more than the action beats? Because for me, that's where the magic was. Thanks for watching, and remember, the best stories don't just entertain you, they wake you up.